KJ Pilcher in the house here on our next session of International Podcast Day. Mr. Pilcher, I'm trying to represent your coverage area, your alma mater. How am I doing here?
All right.
Yes, no, indifferent.
What's going on? I've got you.
I'm saying I've got BV on the hat. I got some Mount Vernon, which I think that's your coverage area, right?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so I'm trying to do. I don't know if anybody's picked up on this yet, but I'm trying to theme up with our guest today. And KJ, former I don't want to say former because you don't actually get it removed. Past award-winning journalist. You got a bunch of awards. You have many leather-bound books, including ones from the National Wrestling Media Association, which we have these big glasses now.
Mm-hmm.
But Cedar Rapids Gazette, longtime wrestling aficionado. Your family's been in wrestling now. If you don't follow KJ on Twitter, you should. If you don't follow him on Facebook, you really should, because I tell you, the parenting this guy has for his softball girls, I am writing down. And my daughter just started playing soccer, the 4-year-old. So I'm now one of those parents.
Uh-huh.
And so we're going to be talking wrestling. We're going to be talking questionable parenting methods, as you have said it. But KJ, welcome to International Podcast Day, and I'm glad you're a part of it, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jason. This is fantastic. Not only do I consider you a friend and a colleague, but you're somebody that I admire and just enjoy seeing your work on many different platforms, from what you've done with podcasts and online and writing, and you're announcing. Pretty honored to be able to work by your side most of the time.
Yeah, we've sat next to each other quite a bit. We've had some Twitter discussions from across the arena at Midlands.
Yes.
One of the cooler things I think I actually saw you do. I'm going to get into your Division III career. When you got to be a I guess part of the Grand March at the Division III championships a couple years ago. Explain the background and how that story developed.
Yeah, really, I'm not exactly sure, but Cedar Rapids has been kind of a semi-regular host of the NCAA Division III championships, and obviously one of the individuals and a driving force behind that is Dick Simmons. They call him the Fixer, and he decided in that the parade of All-Americans to have individuals. Over the years they've had co-All-Americans and champs, and then Cornell All-Americans and champs. And this specific year, he wanted to make sure to include people in the Cedar Rapids area that have been contributors. And for some reason, he thought I was somebody that was worthy of that. I disagree with him fully, but it really meant a lot. He knew my background, as you mentioned. You're wearing the BV hat. I was lucky to kind of be a small, very small part of the BV program in the 1990s and stuff. We've talked about that on podcasts before, just how important and crucial that was for me and what it's led to. And he felt that was he felt it was worthy to include me in that and what I've done as far as covering the sport. I felt really weird, My older brother was an All-American. He was somebody that earned kind of being on that stage. I was somebody, I've just covered the sport. I didn't deserve to be up there with some of those other guys. I think Heilman from Cornell was one of the other individuals leading the All-Americans out. And it's like,
now an assistant coach at Air Force.
Yeah, and it's like I don't deserve to be out here, but whatever's asked of me, I'll do for the betterment of the sport. And if I was asked to carry, I think I carried like the 157 pound. I led the 157 pounders out. And not a 157 pounder at all. But that was a great honor. Probably the neatest thing I think I've ever experienced, being able to be a part of that and lead those All-Americans out that day. It was pretty cool. And my wife and daughters were there. I don't think they knew what the hell was going on. But, they saw me in a suit and out there in front of everybody, so they were pretty proud too.
When was the last time you were in a suit? Because we don't wear suits when we cover events.
Yeah, we don't wear. Geez, when was it? Maybe maybe that was. I think maybe Easter. Maybe there was an Easter somewhere. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, it's few. There's more dust on that thing than maybe the 8-track cassette tapes I have in the garage.
Don't knock the 8-track. My 81 El Camino had an 8-track player in it when I was driving it in high school. So
you had an El Camino?
I had an El Camino. My mom still has it in the garage in Pocosin, Virginia, where
really?
Oddly enough, the last time I was actually on Pinning Combination, I was actually in my hometown outside of the wrestling room.
Yes.
But Pinning Combination, your podcast, I'll bring it up on screen here, is it's a different iteration. You've gone with the RSS feeds, the straight audio, and now you've got an interesting collection of people that you now host on Facebook Live with Wyatt Schultz from the Predicament. You see him as a photographer. I've known him for years in Fargo, and then former coach Dick Briggs. You see it there as part of the newspaper's offering, and we'll have Cody Goodwin on later talking about what they do at the Des Moines Register. But you are part of basically like the four. I call it like there's like 4 or 5 newspapers in Iowa that really have what I would consider one of the most aggressively tough beats. You cover high school and college wrestling in one of the most wrestling crazed states. I know from a stats perspective, when I have something from Penn State on, the numbers come in big. Whenever I have something from Iowa on, the numbers come in big. But you could have Iowa, Iowa State, and Iowa high school wrestling, and that just all funnels into the papers. I mean, you, Nelly, Andy previously, now Cody. I mean, Steve Batterson. There are so many different angles, and it's still an aggressive wrestling beat. So how is the podcast side of things and the wrestling beat kind of melded and using one with the other to make sure you can cover all angles?
Yeah, that's a really good question because, the podcast itself has evolved or changed drastically. I think Wyatt and I, it was just an audio only version, and Wyatt and I were literally like in a storage closet because it was the only quiet place we could get to with a phone line that could reach there. Back in I think it was 2011, I think, when we first did the first Pinning Combination podcast, and then as kind of the structure of our company changed, so did the podcast a little bit, to where we actually had a recording studio that we were able to do it from, and then it eventually turned into more of a webcast in kind of a quasi studio that we have at the Gazette, where Wyatt and we brought Dick Briggs on after he was done coaching, and of course Dick Briggs, All-American at UNI, as well to his long coaching career. But yeah, I mean, there is so much in this area. When you look at the University of Iowa, we also cover UNI, Iowa State at the D1 level, the D3 wrestling with the now American Rivers Conference is such a big priority for us, as well as the prep. So we're covering, Cole, Cornell, Upper Iowa at the D2 level, Luther College, Wartburg. We have a lot of area wrestlers that are at those other institutions that maybe are outside our circulation area that we cover. And the podcast really allows us to kind of encapsulate everything that we cover into one net, pretty much. And the podcast at one time was just one complete podcast covering everything, and now we've kind of broken it up into 2 things because there's so much. I mean, we were going for like 90 minutes at times because there's so much to get to. So we decided, hey, let's break it up into a high school version and a college version, and then that's been kind of the best thing for us, because there is so much content, so many stories, and so much going on, especially in this area, that the nets were starting to give way a little bit. So we've broken that out to really shine a broader light on both sections.
Yeah, I just want to know how many times, because I periodically listen based on the amount of volume of what I need to know about Iowa. For example,
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to Iowa Russell going down on the night of conflict, which I had the opportunity to announce. So in those cases, I would listen to shows as, okay, I'm going into this, and I'd see a guest that was previewing this. I would go in as a media professional or as an announcer. I would listen to that show to make sure I'm going to get stuff, because podcasting gives
Mm-hmm.
you a little, I mean, as a journalist, I mean, in the print media, and that was my past career, was you get 12 to 14 inches. You can't get everything you want to say about somebody into something. And from a
Exactly.
journalistic standpoint, this is not just great for, who you're interviewing, but, for your colleagues that say, okay, well, KJ had this really good feature on this kid. Wow, I'm going to dive into that for my readership, because while it may not be your coverage area per se, you may get somebody like Kyle we just had on from track, give it national attention or something along that line. So what's it like to bring that journalistic wing to a medium that's really kind of changed the game in our sport of wrestling?
Yeah, it really, I think the tagline that we tried to really live by at the Gazette was a one-stop kind of shop, for our coverage, where you can get the written story. Like you said, a lot of times it's a little bit more condensed than what really it might be due. So you're able to really expand on those things, in the online when we're discussing things. It's a lot easier to make it conversational when you're dealing with a feature or a subject than maybe a little bit more formal print wise. But the one thing about the medium is that there are such great elements out there that you can be exposed to different stories. Like you mentioned, you can watch a happy hour or potentially dangerous, Matt Talk Online, and kind of be introduced to like, oh wow, I didn't realize that. And like you said, then kind of delve into things. It's just a way to kind of broaden what you're covering, and it's just amazing how it's really led to that kind of evolution of coverage.
With your co-hosts Dick Briggs and G. Wyatt Schultz, and the G starts for Grant. It means Grant.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, does he bring the Oreos anymore? Because in Fargo, he would show up, and there, Gary Abbott would do a good job with the hospitality treats for the media, because we really didn't get to get up and eat a whole lot. But here comes Wyatt with every flavor of Oreo known to man, and some Easy Cheese.
We no Oreos or Easy Cheese. We have candy occasionally and stuff, but I'm going to give him a little bit of crap because he's a little stingier with us, I guess.
Well, I don't know if he's doing. I think has he technically retired from his other job?
Yes, he's retired now, so he's.
You know what I think that was? I think he was actually saving you. He just didn't like us because all the stuff that fell off the pallets is what he would bring to Fargo.
Oh, okay, I see. You're getting the leftovers. We get the fresh wrapped candies, but yeah, it's fun. I tell you what, what's covering the sports since 2003 with Wyatt. That's a relationship where, I can remember when we first just sat down and started talking. It was literally in the corner of a mat during the 5 Seasons duels at Cedar Rapids Kennedy's gym. And he was taking pictures, obviously, for the Predicament and the 5 Seasons duels finals. I think Apple Valley might have been wrestling Iowa City West, or I can't remember who, but I remember Apple Valley being there for that. And we just sat down and we started. I was covering, taking notes, and he was taking pictures, and we just started chatting. And then it's amazing. It really was a friendship that was forged through the sport of wrestling. and it's blossomed to where we used to just travel places together, and then when the Gazette decided, hey, let's do some of these other elements online, he was the first person I called to say, hey, do you want to do this with me? And it's been that way ever since. And oddly, with Dick Briggs, he coached at our crosstown wrestling. It wasn't really a rivalry because Jefferson was so much better than Wash, but there's a natural east-west rivalry in the city that's separated by a river between the two high schools. And when I was in high school, I did not like him or his team. I did not. I hated everything Jefferson. But after covering his teams and getting to work with him on a professional basis, we became really good friends. We actually lived near each other. And now we've kind of extended this professional relationship and friendship into the podcast now that he's done coaching, and it's been awesome to where now he's a regular contributor at NCAA tournaments and other things like that. So it really, it's a great relationship through the podcast with three people that love wrestling and have devoted a lot of time to the sport just because of, a mere passion for it.
When I hear the name Briggs, I mean, I guess when I'm not from Iowa, so I was exposed to the stories of Don Briggs, and then of course
His brother.
Dick with the brother there, and then Kyle Briggs out there wrestling for Wartburg. I remember pulling it up, and I think this is one of those things where it's like, I think it was Ben Saracen was wrestling Kyle Briggs at the Nationals. And I looked at, they were both Cedar Rapids guys. And I'm like, I guess these two might have met before. And you text me right there. It's like, they hadn't met. So there's a Cedar Rapids story for you. And then I want to know how much Cedar Rapids stories you get from Dick about Don, maybe when the microphones aren't on, because I know Don Briggs he's got some stories.
Yeah. We probably haven't ventured into the big chest of stories from Don, but occasionally there'll be some things from his time wrestling for Gary Kirtle there at Cedar Rapids Jefferson, and then down at the University of Iowa, and then of course he was a longtime coach at UNI. But both Don and Dick are very outgoing individuals, I guess you would say. I think Don still ice climbs, and I've heard stories about the iced over silos that Don still, in his 60s and stuff now that he still does. It's pretty amazing. But Don, I want to say wrestled Gable maybe at one of the state tournaments up in Waterloo. I don't think it went real well for him, but it's just that connection to history. But we haven't really gotten into many of the juicy stories with Don, but I have heard maybe a couple of the not so family friendly ones that are pretty entertaining.
That's the one thing with the podcast that you don't have to worry about for radio. You just mark it explicit, and you'd be like, okay, we are going to be dropping Effenheimers today. Typically with the newspaper, you've got newspaper branding behind you, so you can't really do that. Because I remember one time when I was working at the Daily Press, there was this outrage because the word shit was in the paper. So how times have changed a little bit. But
interestingly, sorry to interrupt you and kind of interject this story. One of the times that I got a lot of pushback from our readers, and of course, we still have a strong paper or print circulation. A lot of rural areas that we go to, so a lot of older people still read the paper. I got a lot of pushback the year that Matt McDonough lost Brandon Preson, I believe, in the Midlands Finals, and I quoted McDonough verbatim saying that he was pissed. The term being pissed. Mm-hmm. And I checked with the editors. They were fine with it. We went with it, and I got a pushback from a lot of the older readers that were upset about using the term being pissed, which kind of blew my mind. But,
well, that's a college athlete.
When you mentioned that.
Well, on the same note, I was
Yeah.
covering. I remember that story too. Story similar. I was covering the AA state tournament back in Virginia, and a kid from Lafayette. I remember the match. Austin Moore from Lafayette High School in Williamsburg, same high school as Lawrence Taylor, by the way, was wrestling one of the Artuzio twins from James Wood High School. I think it might have been Kyle. Again, this is stuff that I want to say 04-ish range maybe. And Artuzio threw him to his back early. He was down, so Moore was down 5-0, and then decked him in the semis. I think it was. It might have been the semis, and then he got to the final. The details of which match it was or lost. I think it was the semis. And then I quoted him in the paper as saying pissed. Then I go back and see it the next day, and it says ticked in parentheses.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, okay, I can deal with that. But I was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, it's a high school kid. The difference there was if I would have quoted a McDonough, college athlete above 18,
right,
you can speak like that. You're an adult. Whereas, while Moore was probably 18 at the time, he was a senior, still a high school athlete. So there's always that.
Yeah.
Now, with what we've got on news sites today, who knows? Now, as it pertains to the Gazette, was pinning combination something that was launched directly with the Gazette in mind, or was that something you did and then they said you pitched to them and be like, hey, I want to do this, and I'm using, say, down in Florida, the Orlando Sentinel, Brent Parsons did his own little thing and then got the Sentinel involved with it because that's where he worked full time. So I'm curious on the germination of pinning combination with the Cedar Rapids Gazette.
It was mostly through the company. I mean, they're looking to do some things. We've done a few. We've done a few little things to kind of dip our toes into kind of a multimedia pool, I guess you could say. And then I just went to him and I'm like, you know what? I want to do something where we just talk about wrestling for an hour and bring some guys on, because right now it's more of a studio show and it's just the three of us talking. Before, it was Wyatt and I talking to coaches or wrestlers and stuff, which is something I'd like to get back to. But mostly it was kind of the Gazette starting to venture into this, and the minute that they said, hey, we're looking into doing this, and actually they're talking to I believe Mark Morehouse about Iowa football, doing something there. And I was like, hey, I would love to do something with wrestling. And they're like, well, what do you mean wrestling? Well,
it's Iowa wrestling,
like,
sells your papers.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, it could be college and high school. I think people would love it. And, of course, J.R. Ogden, I got to say that, he's the editor there, and usually anything that deals with wrestling, hey, let's do it. If you want to do it, let's do it. He covered the sport for a long time. He followed Mike Chapman. I think a lot of people know Mike Chapman's history in covering the sport. It really kind of taught JR a lot of things, and JR is really supportive when it comes to wrestling coverage. So when we mentioned that, hey, how about doing this as part of it, it was all for it. So it was pretty much through the Gazette. They decided, hey, we're going to go this route, and I jumped up and said, let's do wrestling, and it really caught fire because this is going to sound really, really silly, JB.
I'm all for silly. Bring me silly.
But in the studio, the podcast that we have, some of the main ones, we do it for different sports. Mike Halas, our national award-winning columnist, has his own podcast.
Doesn't he portmanteau his name into it too somehow? I think I've seen it was like Hlascast or something like that. Or
yeah. And I can't. I'm blanking on it right now, but we have these little pennants on the wall, and for years it was the On Iowa podcast, which is the big one that Mark Morehouse and Scott Docterman have, mainly discussing Iowa football and a little bit of basketball. And then a pennant for Halas on the wall behind this big picture. Last winter, we finally got a pinning combination pennant to put up there because the viewership had grown to the point where it was one of the top 3 or 4 podcasts with the company. So that was something that we thought was pretty cool when they decided, hey, we finally have we've kind of finally gained the status, I guess, for that.
As we wrap up here, this segment, we're going to go back, and there's where you can find the Pinning Combination podcast at thegazette.com. Easily found there on the sports section. You see got the most recent episodes up from Mr. Briggs, Mr. Grant, Wyatt, Schultz, and Mr. Pilcher. And I guess final thoughts, KJ, as we head out, and we're going to bring Eric Olenowski in about 3 minutes.
Cool.
So, KJ, fire us up.
One thing, some of the things, a little bushwhacker motion there, but one story I want to finish. We've had coaches. We talked to people like you, Terry Steiner. We've had coaches one coach actually he was delivering puppies from his kennel when we were talking to him. Jeff Voss from West Delaware, who's part of the NWCA and everything. It's been really fun and exciting to be a part of that, to have ambassadors of the sport, like the people I mentioned on there, to be able to cover the sport in one that's rich in an area that's rich in tradition. Wrestling fabric, we always say, is kind of intertwined with the blue collar and agricultural background of the state of Iowa, and the people that been able to work with are fantastic. We will be firing up here pretty soon. We kind of do have it structured within the confines of the season. It's a seasonal podcast now, but we will be firing up here pretty soon. We'll be able to see that at thegazette.com, and then you can follow me and for updates at KJ Pilcher on Twitter, and then Facebook on the mats as well. Now that we'll be getting into some things, and the U.S. Senior Nationals will be coming up here in a little over a week.
I'll be down there, so I have to stop. I've already mentioned Cheddar's once on the show today in York, Pennsylvania. I'm looking forward to the Cheddar's again in Coralville. So KJ Pilcher, always a pleasure. See you in a couple weeks, man.
Hey, my pleasure, JB. We'll see you then, bud. Thank you.